Okay, good evening. We are now convened for an agenda review meeting of the Dripping Springs ISD Board of Trustees on this Monday, March 21st. The time is now 6:31 p.m. We have a quorum with all board members present this evening, with the exception of Shannon O'Connor, who is not feeling well this evening. As a reminder, the purpose of agenda review meetings is to review all of the listed agenda items in preparation for the regular board meeting next week. No action will be taken until the regular meeting. This is an opportunity for the board to ask questions and request additional information if needed to be fully prepared for the regular meeting. We will move to public forum. The Board of Trustees encourages and appreciates comments from the citizens of the district and from district employees. Anyone wishing to address the board on posted agenda items may do so during the public forum portion of our meeting. The board asks that each person's comments be no longer than 3 minutes. Board members will listen carefully to all comments made during public forum. However, because the board is subject to the Texas Open Meetings Act, the board cannot address comments until the posted items come up on the agenda. Only the board president, as the designated spokesperson, or their designee may respond to the speaker. The board president's responses are limited to referring the speaker to applicable board policy or referring the speaker to the appropriate administrator. Speakers will be heard on a first-come, first-served basis and are not permitted to relinquish time to another person. We ask that you please state your name and connection to the district and be respectful of the time limit. We have one public comment this evening from Thaddeus Fortenberry. You could come up to this right up here. Thank you.
So you can't hear, by the way, even in this room with that air conditioner on, so we were just observing that. So I caught the tail end of the communications workshop, and I want to just say a couple of things. First off, I'm really glad that we're talking about it, that you're talking about it. That's fantastic. This has been a pet peeve of mine for 2 years. It's little things. I cannot find a consistent calendar that is kept up to date. I have heard that there are emails that go out to people who have students in the district, but I've never seen one because we've not officially enrolled our daughter yet. So I was glad to hear that there was some importance to sending out communications, not just to parents, but also to taxpayers. And the reason why I wanted to stand up and talk about this is because, as I'm sure you guys know, I've been talking quite a lot to parents recently. And I want to say that I agree with what Stephanie said in this last workshop completely. Across the board, the number one complaint I hear is based on lack of transparency or no communication. This is a huge problem. And what happens is that, especially around budgets and issues like this, people fill the void. You know, they don't have information. They don't go through the TASB detailed presentations and things to see the golden pennies and how all these things are allocated, because it's really complicated. So it is important for this district to get ahead of this and to communicate things. When we're talking about all these budget things, we don't have a problem the way we're managing budgets. What we have a problem with is communicating these things. And a lot of this is super complicated. So it's great to hear. Thank you for thinking about it, and I really hope that we can improve it in the next little bit. Thanks.
Thank you for your comments. Okay, so looking at our agenda for next week, we have several recognitions, and I just wanted to mention here, I don't know if all of my colleagues saw that we are hosting, if I have this correct, our home soccer, both teams, right? The girls and the boys on Friday, and so they won the district title for the 4th year in a row. I will be out of town, but I hope somebody can go cheer them on. That's amazing, as long as we're on the subject of recognitions. Did you have a?
Yeah, we were just going to touch base on the topic of recognitions. We have a good number of students who were coming, wanted to check in and see how we've done this process in this room in the past, since we're moving venues and in a room where last month was kind of our first month back because we were moved over from the high school due to students needing to use their building. And so wanted to check in on how historically we've done recognitions in here in this space with a large group of students and just make sure we're well prepared for this month as we're recognizing a large number of kids, and we'll have quite a bit of families joining us and a good number of students, 30 plus in some of these groups, right, Jennifer? That'll be on stage.
I think it'll be that way for all the different meetings, so from here on out.
Did you have a suggestion? Thank you for bringing that up because we have felt a little disjointed. We were just getting into a rhythm in the PAC, and now we're here. So what do you think? What makes the most sense?
Well, you know, my priority is I just want to make sure that we're honoring the students, and so I want it to feel special to them, and that's your intention, is to recognize them and make that connection. And so that's my number one goal. I think if we keep the format that was explained to me last month, where they come around, what happened last month is that they seemed to scatter instead of come through in an organized way, and I don't know that that was the best. I don't know, it felt a little clunky. So I like it better when y'all come and shake their hands, and it also allows us to take a picture of y'all with the kids, but that does take more time. So if we want to keep the format before, I just want to be very clear with the student groups. I told them before to wind around, but I think they got up here and maybe got nervous, and then, so we can escort them a little bit better if we like that format. I just want to make sure that it's honoring to the kids, if anyone has any thoughts about it.
What do you think, Barbara? Because we haven't been back in this setting in 2 years.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I liked it when we did that. I just worry if it's too many, they're kind of crowded together, and it would be hard to do that in an organized way
Right.
for us to. So at least when they did that.
Okay, so we'll
Were
try
y'all
again.
okay with their backs to us and them facing the audience? That didn't bother me, but just want to make sure that's okay with y'all. I feel like if we at least line one top row and then one on the floor and have them kind of in 2 rows where you can see the kids in the larger groups, I just want to make sure you can also see and recognize them, and it's not just a cluster all on the floor and then parents don't really get to see their own child standing up there. So just trying to make sure we have some of that structure in place for them too. Oh, put them up here
Yeah, I
behind
guess
us?
we could take them behind.
We could.
Yeah, I'm trying to think how y'all could shake their hands. Yeah, but that could work. Mhm. Oh,
I'm having flashbacks of when we did have at least the smaller kids up here they would do little presentations and.
Parents don't want to see us. They want to see their kids.
Right, right.
So if they're going to be up there, that's fine, but then we'll have to kind of move.
mhm.
We'll move out of the way, which we've done before also. Because the parents, they're
Yeah.
filming their kid,
Right.
so.
How is the sideline over there for y'all as far as kids coming through?
Yeah, we can, I mean, I'll be kind of escorting them anyway, so it's fine, or we can go that way.
I think there is more room on this side than your side
for Okay.
whatever reason.
That's a good point, from an accessibility standpoint. I'm also a tiny bit worried, coming under that TV is hard, hit your head on that side.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is true that their backs are to us, but to Barbara's point, the parents,
Yeah.
right, the parents want to see them, and then as long as we have that orderly fashion, they would come around either one way or the other, it doesn't matter, and then we are able to congratulate them. That probably does make more sense than putting them up there just because of the,
Accessibility.
right.
Okay. You know what
Yeah,
you're doing?
I think that's fine. Yeah, that's good. Any thoughts or preference about them introducing themselves? My preference is always to have them introduce themselves if they can, but I just want to make sure, it does take a little more time passing the mic, so we're good with that, right? I just want to take the opportunity to be a little clearer on next Monday to make sure, because we do have a lot of kids, and we will have a lot of kids through the end of the year, so, Okay, awesome.
I think if there's just any way, whoever the coach is or the sponsor, if they kind of have that heads up to tell their group,
Yes.
you know, you're going to say your name and
Yeah.
X and pass the mic, then it's not all on you. If the,
Yeah, and I think because we haven't been here in 2 years, I mean, it was kind of understood. Everybody just kind of came and did their thing. Their sponsor said something, kids introduced themselves, and everybody just knew to go.
Yeah,
So I think it's just
out of practice.
retraining everybody
Yeah.
all over again, and
Okay.
it'll flow. And I don't mind that any of us are
If we
are
can get the
covered, I
first
think.
group to do it right,
Right.
the rest will follow. It's just getting the rhythm down.
We can all model before if you want, like we do when we teach, right?
I was like, I just told y'all to start on this side, and you scattered like ants. Like, yell at you like I yell at my own kids. Like, go this way. Okay, I got
think
it.
though, in their defense, were
Oh, it was
were the
all good.
swimmers the first group? Because I think Colin saw mom and it's like,
Oh,
no way
yeah,
was he
it
starting
was
over here
all
because mom was over
fine,
here.
All
and-
fine. I just want to make sure that we're setting them up where they can feel really proud. Is they should feel really proud. I don't want them to feel like it's chaotic or we don't have our act together to honor them. So, okay, I think that's good.
Yes. Okay. And so just because to be a well-oiled machine, are we saying they're going to come, they'll be introduced and start here or start here? Thoughts on that?
Their preference. I don't have a preference on that.
It's probably easier with you sitting there and you directing them for you to say, come this way now. Just because yes, they're gonna kind of look to you to see what's happening if you're giving them the instructions, and so it might
Okay.
just be easier
We'll feed 'em this way.
for you to pull them
Yep.
your way, so to
And
speak. You
Catherine
know?
and Dr. Kidd, y'all will shake hands too. Or, yeah.
With Catherine?
All right, thanks, y'all.
Okay. Thank you for having us go through that. Okay. And so we will go on to the L&I report, which looks like it'll be a little bit different format, right? Am I thinking of the right? Oh, that's the student success report. Okay. Does anybody have any questions, though, about the content of the L&I report?
Dr. Kidd, I know that you mentioned summer school. Is that going to look different? I guess I'm thinking about last summer, how we chose students based on how they may or may not have progressed, and, right. Is that going to be different this year, or what is summer school going to look like?
Right now, it's going to be driven a lot by 45-45, of course. We're still waiting for more information about what that actually looks like. I know they're making some adjustments to the requirements. We want students to be successful and we want mastery. So we're going to invite students, and if they want to come, that would be the academy kids that we would be recommended by a teacher or a campus, we'd actually want them to join us if they're available. So yes, it's going to be kind of a combination. We're still waiting for more. There's a FAQ going around about 45-45 and those final decisions about who would be required to come. But it would be very similar to last year. You're welcome.
That's a great question. I had seen something over spring break about in Leander, and it may be just that their state Board of Education representative is being proactive in trying to get information about like modules that ostensibly take 2 hours and it's taking twice as long, and what that's really like for teachers on the ground. And
Are you talking about reading academies? The modules with not 45-45, right? So that's something a little bit different than what I'm thinking of. Different question, but reading academies, yes, it is taking a little bit longer, where TEA might say it's a 2-hour module, but it's actually a 5-hour module, or vice versa. It might be a 5-hour module. It's really in how fast you can read and click and do the little tasks that go with it. But it's slated to be about 60 hours total. And it's depending on the reader and the comprehension and then what's going on around you. I did mine over spring break, and sometimes you are more engaged than other times, so yes. And they're seeking feedback for that, and also seeing there's hubbub out there about what that could look like and extending, because remember, we have until 2023 for all of our pre-K to 3 and principal teachers to be have gone through that reading academy with the certification. So there's some talk about possibly TEA extending that deadline, but our teachers are in it, and we have some teachers that are already finished. So we do have a high rate of teachers getting it done because we have provided that opportunity for professional learning days for them to have just that solid time to get that done. And we also have Shannon Bogus, who helps with that as well.
Yeah, I hear amazing things about her.
Yes.
I'm just wondering if it's having its intended effect, because we at least have, as trustees, we have the advocacy resolution process, so that's an opportunity for us in April and May. If there is something that needs a message that our legislators need to hear, we can just give some thought to that in
I
the
think
next
right
few
now
weeks.
it's just after the fact, right? It's good for kids, and we're seeing changes in instruction because of it, so it's good for kids. I think the timing was not great for teachers, and so, or extending it. If there's another way to extend, like if the teachers that are really struggling in the spring that can't get it done, could they, if you don't get it done by this date, they kick you out and you start all over. And so maybe looking at being a little easier with that requirement would be helpful.
Okay, Stephanie?
Yeah, I was wondering if we could just get kind of a qualitative update either tonight or next week too about how the intervention has been working for students. I've just been hearing some kind of mixed reports on the battlefront from parents and students alike, just either maybe some differing experiences or maybe expectations of parents, and I think it's important to highlight. I remember when I was at SLI last summer talking about learning loss, and they gave the statistic around Hurricane Katrina that it took students there about 4 years to catch up. And that in some subjects, the catch up was actually never. And then Dr. Morris-Coons had shared an article with us as a board that actually showed some updated research as of this fall, kind of showing some more promising information that learning loss will be caught up, so to speak. And so I just think it takes a lot of time, and I know this is one other large goal area for our district in academic achievement, and so that's going to take time to accomplish as well. But I would just like to hear kind of qualitatively, how is it going for students and teachers?
And just for clarity, are you speaking of 45 Saturdays, or are you speaking of intervention? Because intervention happens
I think
daily
both.
as
I mean,
well.
I would say both, because I think they're both kind of married together with the same purpose, ideally I know we don't like the terminology getting kids caught up, but I feel like that's terminology that we kind of understand a little bit better. But meeting kids where they're at and helping them grow forward.
And so for Saturday school, I know we don't have as many kids regularly showing up as we would like, or that have been invited, which is unfortunate. But that doesn't mean that that's the only intervention they're getting. There's also things happening every day. The master schedule with win time, it's just what I need right then and there. So it's building those blocks. It's not like we stop teaching and we turn around and we teach a different standard or in a different way. For this one kid, it's part of the way we teach, and that's part of knowing students. In that PLC process, when you really drill down into the student data, teachers are already planning those learning experiences in the classroom for that instruction happening in the moment to start filling those gaps also. So it's not just a stop, we have to intervene. It's kind of as we go. I know you know what I'm talking about. In those students that are still struggling, and that's the tier, they're going from tier 1, which is everybody gets the same instruction, to a tier 2 dip in, meaning a different kind of small groups, possibly a pullout, depending on how they're performing and mastering. They might even come back if they have mastered that standard. And so just being able to know the students, it's going to be hard for me to say this is how they're doing, but because it's more of a comprehensive approach instead of a stop and drop and everybody intervene. So we can get some data. We'll see some data, especially when STAR rolls back around, to see how we've changed and moved with that. The interim data that we have, we were a little disappointed by the interim data just because the standards that were tested in the fall for STAR were not the standards in the scope and sequence as they were last year. And so we got some feedback from campuses that they wanted the interim for this year, but now they're like, maybe we don't. Maybe we can save that, not use that data, really rely on MAP instead to drive that instruction, which is another tool that we use to drill down into what standards do the students need more reinforcement on. And so during the instruction time, when you're planning that instruction, you can say, I know that this group of students, because it will group them by that standard, this group of students I might need to pull for a small group to get some foundational skills prior to moving forward with that concept or skill that you're trying to teach in the classroom. But we can come together with some sort of, and here's what we think right now. We did try to highlight that in MAP data just a little bit to show that there is progression. It's not the students specifically that are struggling or that have this loss or have lack of opportunity for learning, but I think we can capture some of that through MAP data that we haven't before. And we're trying to really push into more common assessments. Next year, we're going to be heavy pushing into what does that look like and building our capacity around just assessments in general and deepening the understanding of a common assessment, a formative assessment, a summative assessment, and what that looks and feels like and changes the instruction for a classroom. So that was a long way around saying, we'll see what we can get you so that you're confident. I can definitely pull the 45-45 students because I have those isolated into a certain category in our system. So we'll get you something for Monday.
Okay, any other, oh, sorry, Marissa.
In the report, I noticed in the SEL section about J.C. Pohl, and that's exciting. I had no idea who he was and so forth, or she, I'm not sure. But my question was, is this person being, I know they live in Dripping Springs, is this like a free service or are we paying?
That is a great question. So historically, his students, his own personal students go to DSE. And so every year for DSE, he provides a free service. But for this, he has a deeply reduced rate and he wants to give back. And I say deeply reduced, like, I guess Tisha can work magic on that front, and she asks for a lot. And so, yes, it is at a fraction of his cost.
That's exciting.
Yes.
Exciting news.
Yes.
I was able, I don't even remember the context, but I was able to watch his presentation at DSE at pre-pandemic several years ago, and it's really good. I kind of wished all of my kids had had that opportunity. Any other questions on the L&I report? Okay, well, we will move on to our financial reports. Do you have any questions there, Joanna?
I have a couple questions about our special revenue funds financial statement. We are considerably over budget, and I'm curious what you can talk to us about. It looks like, and I want to be really absolutely 100% clear, it looks like it's Function 11, the instructional budget, that is over by 591%, which I just want to say, number one, let's give as much to instruction as possible. I'm not in any way thinking that that is inappropriate. That is one of our primary goals as a board. But I guess I haven't seen in the budget, I'm not sure what's going on, and I'd like to have a better understanding. And if I'm misreading something, I'm absolutely happy to sit down with someone and talk a little bit about it. But we're substantially over budget, and I haven't seen it in any of our budget amendments, and I'm concerned. Although I would like you to know that if we need budget amendments to ensure that we have the instructional materials and the PD and everything that I'm in no way saying we shouldn't be spending that money. I think probably the issue is we under budgeted. But I think we need to have an understanding.
We can dig into that and bring you some data next week.
That would be perfect. Thank you.
Just to clarify, are you specifically mentioning funds 200 through 420, excluding the Child Nutrition Fund, or are you speaking specifically about the Child Nutrition Fund?
No, the Child Nutrition Fund, I thought I had questions about the Child Nutrition Fund earlier, but I did not.
Okay. So it's the other funds,
It's
yes.
the other
and
fund.
Just so you know, some of that I think is a reflection of the fact that you have to draw down funds from the federal government in order to post them. So that may be part of it, but we'll get you more information on that.
That would be fantastic. Thank you very much.
Stephanie?
Also, I could be missing this somewhere, but I know we've asked for a few months just to have even a ballpark idea of where our fund balance stands and where all of our different surplus and stipends have come from. Is that report coming?
So actually spent quite a bit of time on Saturday working through that. And so I do have, I think we were talking a little bit about our budget workshop next month, and we'll be prepared to show you some preliminary projections. Obviously, there's quite a bit happening in terms of the world of public education and revenues and things like that, especially with the attendance patterns that we've seen statewide this particular school year. I know I've heard little birds
lower than
talking about,
average?
correct.
Yeah.
So I've heard little birds talking about potentially there being some hold harmless adjustments that are being finalized in terms of in terms of just big picture understanding about how our revenues come in. Part of it is tax collections related, and part of it is our attendance patterns. And we did see, just like most of the rest of the state, a bit of a dip in attendance in January. I think we all felt that. And so just understanding what the impact of that could be over time, especially if we get a hold harmless, is still to be determined. So we can have particular scenarios, but I think I've heard we're supposed to get news this week about that.
Do you have a ballpark number about how attendance has affected our budget, just from your preliminary looking at the numbers?
I can get you something
Okay.
potentially next week, but I don't have something just off the top of my head.
Okay. So
But
that'll come April 21st? Is that where we're?
yes, ma'am.
Okay. Okay.
And so you think you're going to be bringing us something in terms of reservations and fund balance going forward?
So it's hard to say exactly. We can make some preliminary projections about next year, but some of that depends on what our budget ends up winding up being in terms of how much we spend in individual categories. But I have started to build out very sort of skeleton plans for the coming years. I think one of the things that I mentioned last agenda review is the fact that during the budgeting process, we had individual budget managers submit to us their ongoing expenses. And so that's one of the things that will continue to be developed, like a Polaroid picture, if you will, over the course of the spring, of seeing, okay, here's when we know. I know I was having a conversation with Clint Pruitt today about, okay, what are some additional facilities needs that we might have to accommodate growth? What are some additional pieces in terms of transportation? And those things will flesh out as we go through the budget process to see what kinds of additional pieces we might want to consider in the future, and how we want to take care of those things, whether that's within the general fund or as we've traditionally practiced, coming as special allocations out of fund balances.
Yeah, I think that's that list that Shannon's asking for, kind of what's the ongoing and how are we planning for that, so that y'all can look at those options and really understand, here's all the pieces, and then they can go either way.
Yeah, and I guess a follow-up to my question, is there plans for in the future, say, next budget season, in years, thereafter, where we can get some in real-time information for that on a regular basis?
In real-time information specifically about attendance or about the
Fund balance.
Oh, fund balance. Yes, I think there's always various scenarios is probably how we'll present it. This is sort of the best in terms of attendance, right? Or tax collections. Here's scenario A, if this happens. Here's scenario B, where this happens. Here's scenario C, where this happens. And understanding that there's things that are ebbing and flowing all the time. It's really hard to say this is what's going to happen. I would say, especially as a consultant the last several years, the advice that I always gave as a consultant over these last few years is normally you're talking about 2% up or down from your budget in terms of where you think you're going to see the budget fall. We've been counseling people more in the 5% on either realm of zero because of COVID uncertainties, because of attendance, and just some changes that have happened between 2017 and 2019 within the Texas legislature and just how cash flows.
I think that would also be good to give a reminder of just the cyclical nature of fund balance, even pre-pandemic, because it's not necessarily intuitive.
Well, it's just much like your own household budget, right? There are some things that you pay for up front, and in this district, we accrue 2 months of payroll at the end of the fiscal year. And so that changes the picture of how things work in much the same way that you pay for a lot of Christmas gifts at the end of your calendar year. We hold on to pay for our teachers in June. And so, you know, the amount of quote fund balance that we have come August looks very different than the amount of fund balance that we have right at this moment.
Right, yeah, just the biggest whys that is the case. Any other questions on financial reports? Oh, okay, thank you.
Can I just
Yes.
add one more piece there? I would say you can find out, looking at our audit that is posted online, what our ending fund balance was as of June 30th. And then you can certainly use this financial report to do a ballpark. Certainly, you know, we want a report that's coming, but if people are curious, you can look at the financial report as it's posted, see where our expenses are, and then take the ending balance that's posted within the audit itself. And that gives you a good idea of, you know, at that time in the school year, where are we? What does it actually look like in terms of a round figure?
Okay, and so next up is our audit update. There aren't specific questions. I was just going to ask if there was anything you wanted to highlight. You have items listed for March. So my assumption is always, if I don't hear otherwise, that this cadence is actually happening.
Was there a specific question, or did you want me to?
I have a question.
Oh, lovely. Oh, go good.
Yeah, so it's exciting. I understand that we're hiring a CPA. I think that from my perspective, what would be good would be to see an organizational chart, not of just business and financial services or business services, because I'm getting a little bit, it sounds like we have some contract employees that we're bringing in. It sounds like it's 2 CPAs that are contract. We're also hiring a permanent CPA to come in and work daily. And I'm getting a little bit, I'm not understanding the organizational structure of business services anymore. I'm sure it's fantastic. I just would like to understand it and see kind of who is reporting to whom and where the CPA falls in terms of director of finance, et cetera, et cetera.
We can do that. Yeah. We've kind of mapped all that out already in some conversation, so we'll put that together and bring that to you.
That would be great. Thank you. And I'm enjoying this audit report. It's really, you know, this is, we have external audits, and then as a board, part of our governance responsibilities is to make sure that we're implementing audit recommendations, whether it's an external audit or an internal audit. So I really appreciate this, because this is really one of the things that we should be focusing on monthly. Thank you for doing it, Catherine.
You're welcome.
And any kind of update can wait till next week. I was just wondering if you had anything that you wanted to highlight for us in your audit update.
Excited that we will have our accountant starting April 4th, the new one that Joanna mentioned. And she has quite like 30 or 40 years of accounting experience to bring. And so we're very excited about her. And she is a local Austin resident and just wanted to be able to move back into the school district business, having been out of, she's in municipal government, but moving into this role, having been a school accountant before and a school district auditor actually as well.
Well, how fortunate for us. Okay, there's no other questions on the audit. The next item is purchasing co-op managing fees. Any questions there? Or in the construction report? Nope. Okay, we also have the 2018 bond report. And the HR report, I assume we'll have Tiffany next time?
Yes, sorry, Tiffany's school district closed childcare early, and so she had to leave to go get children. So our apologies, but I can take her any questions back if you have questions.
Yeah, that would be fantastic. I noted that she put in her report that we're already seeing teachers submit resignations for next year. And then I took some time looking at our HR website to see which positions are advertised. If we could start getting an idea from her in the report how much teacher turnover we're seeing, and that would be great. I know that that's an issue, that I've heard. That's the primary issue I've heard on the campaign trail is people are really worried about teacher recruitment and retention.
Yeah, I can check in with her on that and see what she can pull together.
Thank you.
And clearly, that is the concern across the whole state. So if any trustees wanted to weigh in, there are some avenues to do that. I mean, we never really know how effective our voice is, but, and TEA over spring break, right? Added something like, what was it, 24 teachers to the task force instead of 2? So, progress there. Okay, any other questions on the HR report? All right, the superintendent's report, nothing really there.
Few subdivisions, and then DECA traveling for their competition, so good usual things happening.
Okay, and as always, trustees, I'm sure y'all are out and about, and if you can just remember to let really Jennifer know so that we can include that in the Board of Trustees report. Gotten a lot of positive feedback about that, of just people appreciating the coverage across the district. So, okay, now we are at the student success report that I tried to bring up at the beginning. Anything that you want to highlight or?
So what we were thinking, there's so many great things happening, not only in my department, but throughout the whole district. And so what we've done, and we've done this last time, we spell out the word success and then have the little qualitative piece underneath. But for the presentation, while these things are great, we're going to highlight 3 areas just to keep it concise, since everybody will see the other report. We're going to highlight capacity building, the EL learner focus, and then also the student achievement piece, if that's suitable for everyone.
And so this likewise ties into one of the top 3 goals that we've been talking about through XG. So what do y'all think of this format? Any feedback for Dr. Kidd?
I just want to say I really appreciate the way that you've written all your reports. Every time I sit down and read them, I come away with questions, but I also come away with a lot of new information, and it's very digestible to someone who doesn't have a doctorate in education. So I really appreciate that.
Thank you for that feedback. I appreciate that.
Okay, there are no questions or additional information you'd like to see for our regular meeting? Joanna?
I do have a few questions, some of which I previewed with you. One, this is not one but for the TPRI and the information regarding student achievement in kindergarten, this is a lot of great information, but I'm not really if you could help us understand what that looks like on the ground and whether the kindergartners are where they're supposed to be, because I tried to teach my child to read and it didn't work very well. So I would appreciate that perspective from you. Some of the numbers, and I know that you have some answers for this for middle school, especially in math, for middle school participation in MAP, are concerning. And it sounds like one school may not be accounted for in that, but really helping us understand the plan for making sure that MAP's going to be used across the board with fidelity in a way that we can really trust the data, so that I know that that's a longer term plan and that we've been talking about that in XG, but it would be, it was a little shocking to see that only 14 7th graders took the math map test. So that just making sure that we understand where we are and how we're going to get to being able to use the data more effectively, especially at the middle school level, because at least as I look at the numbers, and I'm not a mathematician either, it does look like we have pretty good participation in K through 5.
Yes. And it's just that different culture that has been set up historically, and so that's fine. We're working on, we mentioned building capacity and assessments, and this is part of it. And through that, we also have to have the training behind that and how teachers read the reports. And so we want to be really consistent and clear across the district so that teachers are well-versed K-8, where we give our tests and give our assessments. And we mentioned earlier, maybe taking away the interim star and placing that with MAP. So they would do all grade levels K-8 3 times a year.
I guess the other question I'd have for next week is I don't understand how it, especially with the MAP data translated to STAR for math for 6th, 7th, and 8th, how you can extrapolate. I don't understand with such a small group of students taking the test, how we can extrapolate to some of those numbers. If you're relying on different data, that which might be the case, it just helping us understand why those, like that you think 93% of 7th graders will be at approaches in math. Like, I'm sure you have better understanding of that, but I'd like to understand how you came up with that.
Sure. I just want to be clear. The 93 is under the fall. That's where we tested all the students. We
Okay.
left it off of the winter because of the small numbers. So
Okay.
only the 3rd, 4th, and 5th graders are shown.
That makes a lot more sense.
Good. I could take that question off for next
Yeah, you
time.
can take that question off. Thank you.
And you can clarify this next week, but one thing that leapt off the page to me on page 2 is that when you, under curriculum work, when you said the clarity in determining what our students should know and do allows teachers to personalize learning and differentiate experiences for students. And we had talked so much about how this pendulum can swing from a focus on standardized tests to 21st century learning. And if I'm understanding this correctly, that by first establishing that guaranteed viable curriculum and having that level playing field, it actually allows teachers more freedom to personalize learning and to incorporate some of these other skills.
That's absolutely correct. And so if we're all working off the same sheet music, we can differentiate up, we can differentiate down. We can do what we need to do to take care of all students and take them and truly personalize it. And we actually will write it into the curriculum documents, the level of rigor needed for each standard, so every teacher is clear of where they need to get the students to go to.
Do we have some electrical problems in the moment? Or
So that was perfect, yes.
Okay. That's fun to see, for it to just kind of gel, that we're all on the same page here. Okay, was there anything else in this report? Okay, thank you. Oh, I'm sorry, I was just going to mention one other thing I wrote down that was on page 3 under special education. There was an April 5th training to focus on transition planning for life after high school for those students. And I've heard that from our community members, a desire to see that. And then at the last conference, another trustee, raised his hand in a session and was basically trying to find that very answer for his district of what are the options to assist these kids. So I would love to see you highlight that next week. Thank you. Okay. Is there another question on this?
She was just looking at labeling.
Yeah, I love this data. It's so great to see it, and I love the way that you write it. It would be great if, the math test that you're pulling out and the MAP test at the top of page 4 and the top of page 6, that they're dated when we've taken them.
That is a great suggestion. We'll add that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Yes, and if Shannon were here, she would agree. She's always asking for dates. Okay. So is there anything in the consent agenda that you have questions about for next week? No? Okay.
So Tiffany would be doing administrator contracts, but she's not here. So we'll be sharing with you in closed the recommended list, and so we'll be going over that as a personnel item today for discussion, and then Tiffany will have it for next week for y'all.
Okay, and then the transfer policies we've talked about before. Are there any lingering questions there on all this? Okay.
So this would be the second reading back for action this month, so happy if y'all noticed anything in the last month to address that.
Okay, thank you. The board will now convene in a closed meeting to discuss the following items posted on our agenda as allowed by the Texas Government Code, sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, 551.076, 551.082, 551.0821, 551.089, and 551.129. No voting will take place in the closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussion in closed session will take place after the board reconvenes, and the time is now 7:17 p.m. Thank you for joining us. Okay, we are back from closed session, and having no other business before us this evening, we will adjourn at 8:57 PM. Thank you.